Hello. You know what's worse than getting cheated on? Finding out that the guy your wife betrayed you with actually thinks she's some loyal, innocent woman. Like she wasn't sneaking around behind my back the same way she probably did to every guy before me. It's almost poetic. The irony, the sheer stupidity of it. But hey, I don't blame him. I blame her. Because I know exactly what she is. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's a liar getting away with it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things or confront her like some dramatic fool who just stumbled onto the harsh reality of life. No, I sat back, took a deep breath, and let my mind do what it does best, calculate. Because emotions don't win battles. Strategy does. And if she thought she could play me, if she thought she could just move on to her new guy and live happily ever after while I played the heartbroken husband, she was in for a surprise. A big one. It started with a feeling. Not paranoia, not suspicion, just a slight shift in behavior. The little things that most men ignore until it's too late. The way she started smiling at her phone more often. The way she suddenly cared about her appearance in a way she hadn't in years. The way her work trips started becoming more frequent and always seemed to be scheduled when I had my own business commitments. I played along. I let her think I was blind, because blind men don't plan revenge. Blind men get blindsided. And I don't lose. So I dug. Not out of desperation, not out of insecurity, but because I like knowing exactly what game I'm playing. And when I found it, when I saw the messages, the sneaky little rendezvous, the hidden photos, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt satisfaction. Because now I had the proof. Now I had control. And now, I could do what I do best, destroy her carefully crafted fantasy piece by piece. His name was Dylan. A ridiculous name for a ridiculous man. Young, naive, and absolutely convinced he had found his true love. It was almost painful to watch how deeply he believed it. He wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was in love with her. Thought she was leaving me for him. Thought she was different from all the other women he had known before. Oh, Dylan. Sweet, foolish Dylan. You think you're the first? I did my homework. I traced his social media, his job, his friends. I wanted to know everything about him. Where he worked, where he lived, what he wanted in life. And the more I learned, the clearer my plan became. Because Dylan wasn't some random guy looking for a fling. No, Dylan was invested. Dylan believed in their love story, which made my job a whole lot easier. I started small, subtle, a shift in energy. My wife, let's call her Emily, was still pretending everything was fine, playing the perfect wife at home while sneaking off to be with her true love in secret. I let her think I was oblivious. Let her think she was winning. And then I began planting the seeds of doubt. A well-timed message sent to her work phone while she was in the shower, knowing she'd be paranoid about it. A slight change in my routine that made her question whether I knew more than I let on. A conversation, casual but deliberate, about trust, about honesty, about how people always think they can outsmart the ones who truly know them. She started to feel the heat, but she couldn't quite place why. And that's exactly how I wanted it. But the real fun started when I turned my attention to Dylan. Because Dylan thought he had won. Thought he was the better man. Thought he was saving her from a loveless marriage. I needed him to believe in that fantasy just a little bit longer before I tore it apart. So I played along. I created a fake account. A woman, beautiful, engaging, perfectly tailored to everything I knew about him. I studied his past, his interests, his type. And I became her. A casual like on one of his older photos. A well-placed comment that seemed innocent but just flirty enough to pique his interest. A slow, deliberate build that made him question things he didn't even realize he was questioning. And when the moment was right, when I knew he was hooked, I made my move. Emily had no idea. She was too busy playing house with her stolen romance, too confident in her ability to juggle two lives without consequence. But I had been patient. I had been careful. And now, all the pieces were falling into place. I watched as Dylan started to waver. As he started questioning things he never questioned before. As he started second-guessing the woman he thought was his soulmate. I fed him doubts, fed him possibilities, fed him the idea that maybe, just maybe, Emily wasn't as perfect as he believed. And it worked. Oh, did it work beautifully. But this was just the beginning. Because breaking his illusion was only the first step. The real revenge was yet to come. And when it did, Emily wouldn't just lose me. She'd lose the man she thought she had won. And she'd lose in a way that would haunt her forever. Life was good. Not perfect, because nothing ever is, but good in the way that makes a man believe he's built something solid, something real. My days followed a steady rhythm. Wake up early, get in a workout, sip my coffee while Emily moved around the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, mumbling about how she wasn't a morning person. I'd laugh, kiss her on the forehead, and head to work. Evenings were predictable too. Dinner together, sometimes out, sometimes at home. A show we both pretended to like. Small talk about our days. It wasn't fireworks, but it was steady, comfortable. And when you've been with someone for years, that comfort starts to feel like an achievement. Looking back now, I see the cracks. Tiny ones at first, easy to ignore. The way she used to complain about couples who spent dinner on their phones, but then she started checking hers more often. The way she laughed at my jokes until she didn't. The way she once touched me absent-mindedly, hand on my arm, fingers brushing against mine. But then one day, the touches stopped. Little things. Nothing obvious enough to ring alarms. Nothing I could put my finger on and say that. That was the moment it changed. We had what I thought was an understanding. I worked hard, built a life for us, made sure we were comfortable. She had her job too, but she never had to worry about anything. If she wanted something, she got it. If she needed something, I handled it. It wasn't a dynamic I resented. I was raised to believe a man provides, that security is the backbone of love. And for a long time, it worked. Our weekends were lazy, spent in coffee shops or walking through the city, stopping into stores we had no intention of buying from. Sometimes, she'd drag me to one of those candle shops she loved, picking up each one, making me smell them, asking which I liked best. I never really cared about the candles, but I cared about the way she smiled when I played along. The way she'd wrinkle her nose at a scent she hated, mock gagging before laughing and shoving the candle back on the shelf. There were trips too. Short ones, weekend getaways where we'd sleep in hotel beds and order room service just because we could. I remember one trip to the mountains, a cabin with a fireplace, the smell of pine everywhere. It snowed that night, and she stood by the window watching it fall, wrapped in one of those oversized sweaters she loved. I walked up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and she leaned into me like she belonged there. That moment stuck with me. Still does. Because if someone had told me then that one day she'd be sneaking around with some guy named Dylan, that she'd look at another man the way she used to look at me, I would have laughed in their face. Even the intimacy had felt stable. Maybe not as electric as the first few years, but still good, still something I believed we both enjoyed. We had inside jokes, shared memories, a rhythm that felt unshakable. If there were fights, they were small, insignificant. The kind every couple has. Who left the dishes in the sink? Who forgot to take out the trash? Nothing that ever felt like the beginning of an ending. But then, the nuances. The signs. Her perfume changed. A different scent, subtle but new. She said she just wanted to try something different. That would have been fine, except she wore it all the time now. Before, she'd spray perfume before a date night, a special occasion. Now, she wore it even when she was just grabbing coffee with a friend. Then there were the late nights. Not often at first. A work event, a last-minute meeting. She'd text me, "Don't wait up, babe. Love you." And I believed it. Because why wouldn't I? She'd never given me a reason not to. Except, people don't just change overnight. They shift, little by little. And I could feel it, even if I wasn't ready to admit it. I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting on the couch, watching some crime show we both liked. She was on her phone more than usual, but I didn't say anything. I glanced over, saw her smiling slightly at the screen, fingers typing quickly. "Something funny?" I asked casually. She glanced at me, just for a second, and then the smile disappeared. "Just a meme from work." A meme. Right. That was the moment I should have known. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Quick, dismissive. Like she was already thinking of an escape route. But I let it go. Because when you love someone, you don't immediately assume the worst. You assume stress, or distraction, or just a bad day. You assume the person you build a life with wouldn't throw it all away for something temporary, something shallow. Now, I see it for what it was. The beginning of the end. It wasn't a single event. It was a slow unraveling. A gentle, almost imperceptible pulling away. And by the time I realized how far she drifted, she was already gone. Not physically, no. She was still there, still sitting beside me, still going through the motions, but emotionally? She had already left. And yet, she smiled at me, kissed me before bed, woke up beside me like nothing had changed. I wonder now, did she feel guilty? Did she have moments where she looked at me and thought about what she was doing? Or did she justify it to herself? Tell herself I wasn't enough, that she deserved more? That Dylan somehow made her feel something I never could? It doesn't matter anymore. Because what she doesn't know is that while she was slowly slipping away, I was watching, calculating, waiting. And soon, she'd understand exactly what that meant. It was a Wednesday. Just another ordinary evening in what should have been an ordinary week. I had come home late from work, my head full of the usual responsibilities, numbers, meetings, decisions. The kind of things that keep a man grounded in reality. Emily was already home, sitting on the couch, curled up with a blanket and scrolling through her phone. Nothing unusual about that. But something was different. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the way she didn't look up immediately when I walked in, or the way she locked her phone screen just a fraction of a second too fast. I let it slide. Could have been nothing. Could have been everything. I dropped my keys on the counter, loosened my tie. "Hey," I said, waiting for the usual smile, the usual, "Hey, how was your day?" But instead, she just gave a distracted, barely glancing at me before shifting slightly on the couch, her body angled away. That's when I saw it, the tiniest, almost imperceptible movement. Her hand, subtly turning her phone over, screen down, like it was second nature. That was the first real sign. It was small. So small that most men would have ignored it. Most men would have told themselves they were overthinking it. But I don't ignore details. Details are what separate the fool from the strategist, the blind from the man who sees exactly what's coming. So I didn't react. I didn't ask her who she was texting, didn't accuse her of anything, didn't let her see even a flicker of doubt on my face. Instead, I walked over, sat beside her, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders. She didn't move away, but she didn't relax either. I leaned back, pretending to unwind. "Long day?" She nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah, work was a nightmare." It was a lie. A small one, but a lie nonetheless. I knew because earlier that day she had texted me, "So bored at work. Nothing's happening today." I remembered that text clearly. At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. But now, seeing her sit there, fabricating stress that didn't exist, I felt something shift inside me. "Oh yeah," I said, keeping my voice casual. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Just for a second. Just meetings. Same old stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, like I believed her. Like I wasn't already filing away every inconsistency, every hesitation. She stood up then, stretching. "I'm gonna take a shower." Another small sign. She never took showers this early. I watched her disappear into the bathroom, closing the door just a little too quickly. And then, as if on instinct, my eyes went back to her phone. It was still there, screen down, a silent witness to whatever conversation she had been trying to hide. I wasn't going to touch it. Not yet. That wasn't my style. If I was going to find something, it wouldn't be because I snooped like some paranoid fool. It would be because I let her slip up on her own. And she would. They always do. Instead, I pulled out my own phone, opened up our last texts. "So bored at work. Nothing's happening today." I let my thumb hover over the keyboard, considering my next move. Then I typed, "Thought you said work was slow today?" and hit send. I waited. Minutes passed. No response. The shower was still running, but I knew she had her phone in there with her. She always did. And yet, she didn't answer. That's when I knew. Not the full picture, not the details, but enough. Enough to tell me that something was off. She came out 15 minutes later, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. She looked at me then, her expression carefully neutral, but I could see the edges of something else underneath. I lifted my phone slightly, letting her see the message. "You never answered." For a split second, just a split second, I saw it, the flicker of panic in her eyes before she forced a laugh. "Oh, yeah. I just meant it was slow in the morning." The afternoon got crazy. Lie number 2. She sat back down, picking up her phone with just a little too much nonchalance, unlocking it, scrolling like nothing was wrong. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what I had felt in that pause, in that hesitation. I smiled at her then, slow and deliberate, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Glad you survived." She smiled back. Forced. Uneasy. I said nothing else that night. Let her think she got away with it. Let her feel safe. Because the best way to catch someone in a lie is to let them weave it themselves, thread by thread, until they're tangled in a trap they don't even see coming. And Emily? She had just taken the first step straight into mine. It wasn't paranoia anymore, it wasn't just a gut feeling or an overreaction, it was real, something was off, and I wasn't about to sit back and ignore it, so I started watching, not in an obvious way, not in the way that makes people defensive, but in the way that a man does when he knows the truth is just beneath the surface waiting to be uncovered. I knew better than to ask direct questions. She'd already proven she could lie without hesitation, so I needed a different approach. I needed her to think she was still winning. The first thing I noticed was her phone. She used to leave it lying around, screen up, notifications popping up without a care in the world, but now it was different. Now the screen was always down, always locked with a passcode that I realized had changed. I tried the old one once just to see, nothing, no access. She had never changed it before, not once in all the years we had been together, but now suddenly it was different. That was the second major sign, the kind of sign that makes a man stop pretending things are normal. Then there was the location lie. I had asked her where she was headed one evening, nothing suspicious, just a casual question. She hesitated again, barely, but enough, then said she was meeting a friend for drinks. I nodded, acted like I wasn't thinking anything of it, but later when she was gone, I checked the location. She always had her phones tracking on, a habit from years ago when we both liked knowing the other was safe, but when I opened the app, nothing, no location sharing at all. Now that was interesting. She had never turned it off before, not once, not even when we had stupid little fights about pointless things, not even when she was mad at me, but now suddenly it was off, like she didn't want me to know where she was. I didn't call her, I didn't text her, I just sat back and let the moment settle, because what she didn't realize was that lies have weight, and the more you carry, the more they slow you down. The next day, I asked her casually how the night had gone. She smiled, too quick, too bright, said it was fun, said her friend had gone through some relationship drama and she had just been there to listen. I nodded, asked where they went, and the hesitation was back again. She said the name of a bar I knew well, a place I had been to plenty of times. So later that night, I checked their social media. It was a popular spot. They posted pictures almost every evening, people laughing, drinks in hand. I scrolled through their latest post, looked at the background, at the faces, at the crowds, and she wasn't there. Interesting. I didn't confront her about it, not yet. Instead, I started testing little things, small, harmless questions, just to see how she'd react. I asked her what she had for lunch one day, an easy question, a forgettable one. She answered too quickly, said sushi, without thinking, but I knew for a fact she hated sushi, had always said it was the texture, so why was that the first thing that came to mind, unless it was someone else's lunch, unless she was repeating what someone else had ordered because she had been with them long enough to remember it. Lie number 3. Then there were the calls, or rather the ones she didn't take before. If her phone rang, she'd answer without hesitation, right in front of me, even on speaker, sometimes if her hands were full, but now she was different. If she was home and her phone rang, she'd glance at it and let it go to voicemail, or she'd step into another room before answering. One night while we were watching TV, her phone buzzed, not a call this time, just a text. She glanced at it, locked the screen quickly, and kept watching the show, but she wasn't watching. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't paying attention at all. So I waited a few minutes, got up, stretched, said I was grabbing a drink from the kitchen. I walked behind her, glanced at her phone as I passed, and there it was, just barely, but enough for me to catch 3 little dots on the screen. Someone was still typing, someone was still waiting for her to answer, and she was making sure I didn't see who it was. She thought she was careful, she thought she was being smart, but she was making mistakes, small ones, but mistakes nonetheless, and I was collecting them all, every lie, every inconsistency, every change in routine. I wasn't angry, not in the way most men might be. I wasn't emotional, I wasn't losing sleep over it. Instead, I was fascinated, watching her create her own downfall, thread by thread, stitch by stitch. She was weaving the rope she didn't even know she was going to hang from. That weekend, I played the perfect husband the same way she was playing the perfect wife. We went out for brunch like we always did. I asked about her plans for the week, nodded at her answers, smiled at the right moments. She didn't suspect a thing. She thought she was still in control, and that was exactly what I wanted, because I wasn't just going to catch her, I wasn't just going to expose her, I was going to make sure she understood exactly what it meant to lie to me, to betray me, to think for even a second that I was a man she could outplay. And so, I waited, collecting, watching, calculating, because the game had already started. She just didn't know she was losing yet. There's a moment when suspicion turns into certainty, when the doubts that have been circling in your head like vultures finally land and start tearing into the truth. And in that moment, everything changes. It's not anger at first, not even rage, it's something colder, sharper, something that cuts through every illusion you've been clinging to and leaves you standing in the wreckage of what you thought was real. And for me, that moment came at exactly 10:42 p.m. on a Friday night, when I saw the proof staring back at me from a screen. I wasn't looking for it, not that night anyway. I had already been gathering information, already been playing my part, letting her think she was winning. But then fate decided to speed things up. I had left my phone on the nightstand. While she was in the shower, it buzzed once, then twice. I glanced over, expecting a work email, maybe a notification from the news, but it wasn't mine. It was hers. Her phone had lit up next to mine, and there on the screen was a message preview that erased any lingering doubt. I had "Can't wait to see you again last night was amazing." There was no name, just a number, and that alone told me everything, because she never left contacts unnamed, never had before, but this one she had hidden in plain sight. I sat there staring at the words as the sound of running water filled the room, and something inside me shifted, not in a way that made me want to yell or throw things that would have been too easy, too predictable. No, what I felt was something different, something surgical, a sense of clarity that settled into my bones. Because now I knew. Now there was no more room for excuses, no more mental gymnastics, trying to explain away the lies. Now it was real, and now I had what I needed. I didn't touch her phone, didn't scroll, didn't dig any deeper than I had to, because I didn't need to. The message was enough. But just as I was about to put it down, it vibrated again. Another message. "I wish you could have stayed longer. Miss you already. Miss you already." It was almost laughable, almost insulting, the audacity of it, the sheer stupidity of thinking she could play this game and not get caught. But I didn't laugh, I didn't react at all, because reacting would mean losing control, and if there's one thing I refuse to be, it's a man who loses control. The water shut off, the bathroom door opened, steam curling out into the room, and there she was, wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping, her face fresh and clean like she hadn't just spent the last however many months lying to my face. She glanced at me, smiled, slightly oblivious. I looked right at her, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see the woman I married. I saw a stranger. I stood up, stretched, yawned like it was just another night in our home. She walked past me, grabbed her phone off the nightstand, completely unaware that I had already seen everything that mattered. She didn't check the messages right away. She was too comfortable, too confident in her deception. She thought she was untouchable, and that was her first mistake. Her second mistake was underestimating me. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a drink, felt the burn of whiskey coat my throat, and let my mind settle, because now that the truth was in my hands, the real work could begin. This wasn't going to be a fight. There would be no shouting, no accusations, no pathetic arguments where she deny, until there was nothing left to deny. No, this was going to be something else, something far more calculated. Because if she thought she had won, if she thought she could play me, then she was about to learn exactly what happens when you betray someone who sees 10 steps ahead. I had the proof, I had the knowledge, and now all I needed was the perfect way to use it. Revenge isn't about anger, it's about precision, about patience, about knowing exactly where to strike, and when to do it, not too early, not too late, but at the moment when they think they're safe, when they think they've won, when they've built up a little fantasy world in their head and convinced themselves they're untouchable. That's when you strike, that's when you make sure the fall isn't just hard, but absolute and irreversible. Emily thought she had me fooled, thought she was balancing two lies with grace, thought she had her little secret safely tucked away where I'd never find it. But she had already lost the moment I saw that message on her phone, because now I had something she didn't. I had knowledge, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't about to waste it by acting like some scorned husband, throwing tantrums and demanding answers. No, I was going to be the man she never saw coming. The first step was understanding her weaknesses. Every person has them. Some are financial, some are social, some are purely psychological. For Emily, it was all three. She had built her entire identity around appearances, around being seen as the perfect wife, the woman who had it all together, the woman with a stable home, a loving husband, a beautiful life she could showcase to friends and family. She cared about that image more than anything, which meant the worst thing I could do to her was not just expose her, but make sure she was stripped of every illusion she had created. But that wasn't enough. No, she needed to lose something else, something she actually cared about. And that's when I realized Dylan was the key, because Dylan wasn't just some guy. He wasn't just a fling. He was someone she had built up in her head as her way out. Her escape, her new beginning. She wasn't just cheating. She was replacing me in her mind, building a bridge from her old life to a new one. And if I let that bridge crumble, if I made sure it collapsed right under her feet, then she would be left with nothing, no husband, no lover, no stability, no safety. So I started playing the game. I became more affectionate, more present. I gave her nothing to suspect, no reason to think I knew a thing. I watched her closely, took mental notes on when she texted him, when she made her little excuses to slip away, when she acted distracted, lost in her thoughts, no doubt picturing whatever pathetic future she was planning with him. I let her dig deeper. I let her make more mistakes, because the deeper she went, the harder the fall would be. I created a fake identity online, someone just her type, someone charming, successful, just enough mystery to be intriguing, and then I baited the hook not for her for Dylan, because Dylan was invested in her. He thought he had found something real, but men like him, men who chase married women, they're not loyal, they're opportunists, they're looking for something easy, something exciting, and if you give them something better, something shinier, they'll take it every time. It started slow, a casual message on social media, a comment here, and they're building just enough curiosity to make him wonder, and then just when I knew I had his attention, I made the move, a direct message, casual, confident, the kind of thing that gets under your skin and makes you want more, and Dylan, oh Dylan, took the bait so easily. Because men like him always do, they're not hunters, they're scavengers picking at whatever falls into their lap. And I had just dangled something he couldn't resist. While he was busy falling for my carefully constructed illusion, I started setting up the final stage for Emily. Because once he was hooked, once I knew he was on the verge of betraying her the same way she had betrayed me, I needed to make sure she found out in the most spectacular way possible. She needed to see it, she needed to feel what it was like to be discarded, to be replaced, to be humiliated. So I planned a perfect little moment, a weekend away. She thought it was my way of reconnecting. She thought I was clueless, thought she was in control. But what I had actually done was make sure she had no escape, no excuses, no way to spin what was about to happen. Because while we were away, I made sure Dylan was occupied with the fantasy. I had fed him, occupied enough to make a mistake that I would make sure landed directly in Emily's lap. Because there's nothing worse than realizing the person you gave up everything for, the person you thought was your new beginning, was just another liar, another cheater, another fool who was never yours to begin with. And when Emily saw that proof, when she realized that Dylan wasn't her escape, wasn't her fresh start, wasn't her victory, but just another betrayal waiting to happen, that's when she would break. That's when she would understand exactly what it meant to be played. And the best part, the part that made every second of planning worth it, was that by the time she figured it out, by the time she saw the full picture, I would already be gone, already moved on, already in a place where she could never reach me. Because this wasn't just about revenge, this was about making sure she lost in a way that left nothing behind, no hope, no second chances, just the cold hard truth of what she had done and the ruins of the life she thought she had built. Timing is everything. Revenge isn't just about striking back, it's about striking at the precise moment when the blow will land with maximum impact, when they have nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, when the walls close in and the truth becomes inescapable. Emily thought she was winning, thought she was getting away with everything, but what she didn't know was that every step she took, every lie she told, every moment she spent with Dylan was leading her straight into the trap I had built just for her. And now it was time to spring it. I told her we needed a weekend away, just the two of us. She hesitated for a second, like she was weighing her options, trying to figure out if Dylan would be okay with her disappearing for a couple of days, but she didn't want to seem suspicious, so she agreed, smiling, kissing me, acting like the devoted wife she thought she was still playing so well. What she didn't know was that while she was packing her bags, while she was preparing for what she thought was a normal getaway, I was making sure Dylan was otherwise occupied, because Dylan thought he had found something better. He had been messaging my fake persona for days now, thinking he was on the verge of something new, something exciting, and now was the time to push him over the edge. The morning of our trip, I made sure Dylan got the final push he needed, a simple invitation, an offer to meet, a chance to finally step over the line he had been dancing around for weeks, and of course he said yes. He couldn't resist. Men like him never can. He had no idea that while he was busy getting ready to betray Emily, while he was thinking he was about to secure something even better than the stolen wife of another man, I was making sure Emily would see exactly what kind of man she had thrown everything away for. We arrived at the hotel, a beautiful place, upscale, elegant, everything she would have expected from a husband who still adored her. I played my part perfectly, smiling, laughing, keeping the mood light and warm, while inside I was calculating every second, every move. I made sure she kept her phone on the table, made sure she saw the moment it lit up with a message from Dylan, a message I had sent from my fake account just at the right time. Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll finally make you forget about him. Her face changed instantly, the way people's faces do when the ground beneath them starts to crumble. She grabbed her phone so fast she didn't even think I had noticed, but I saw the panic in her eyes, the way her fingers hovered over the screen like she was trying to decide what to do, trying to figure out if she could delete it without me seeing. I leaned back, sipping my drink, watching her unravel without saying a word, and that was the moment I knew she felt it. She felt the shift. She felt that something was very, very wrong. She didn't say anything right away, didn't ask to leave, didn't try to make an excuse. She just sat there staring at her phone, trapped in her own mind, trying to work through a problem she didn't even understand yet. and then just as she was starting to collect herself, I struck again. I pulled out my own phone casually like I was just checking messages, and then with perfect timing I sighed, shook my head, muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Unbelievable. She looked up instantly, her body tense, her eyes searching my face for some hint of what I was talking about, and then I turned the screen toward her, letting her see what I wanted her to see, a message from a mutual friend, someone she trusted, someone she wouldn't question. "Hey man, I just saw Dylan at the lounge with some brunette, thought you should know." I watched her swallow hard, watched her try to keep her face neutral, but she wasn't as good at this as she thought she was. She was breaking already. I could see it, the rapid blinking, the way her fingers tightened around her phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, looking at her like I was just another husband, confused and betrayed. "Weird, right?" I said. "He told me he was out of town this weekend." Guess that was a lie too. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She was scrambling inside, trying to piece together an explanation, trying to figure out if there was any way to spin this in her favor, but there wasn't. There never was, because I had made sure of that. I had made sure. There was no escape, no way out. Then, as if on cue, another message hit her screen, this one from Dylan himself, another bait I had planted, carefully orchestrated to hit at just the right moment. "Hey, I'm sorry I had to leave so suddenly, just didn't feel right, you know. Hope she was worth it though." And that was it, the final blow, the one that shattered every last illusion she had been holding on to, because now she wasn't just caught, she was discarded, rejected, left with nothing but the cold realization that the man she had risked everything for had already moved on before she even had a chance to run to him. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't smiling, she wasn't confident, she wasn't the woman who thought she had everything under control. She was just another liar caught in her own web, and I sat there calm, steady, watching her drown in the consequences of her own choices, because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about making sure she understood that the game had never been hers to win, it had always been mine. Emily's face drained of color, her fingers clenched around her phone so tightly I thought she might crack the screen. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came out, just shallow, panicked breathing, like she was trying to force air into lungs that had forgotten how to work. She looked at me, then really looked at me for the first time, not as her husband, not as the man she thought she had deceived, but as something else, something she couldn't understand, and it terrified her. She tried to speak, but the words came out broken, scattered like pieces of glass on the floor. I don't. I can explain. Her voice was shaking, her entire body was shaking, because she knew she had lost, but she hadn't fully grasped how badly. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully, the way a predator watches something small and trapped, letting the silence stretch between us, letting her drown in it. She needed to feel it, the weight of her own deception, the way it was suffocating her now, the same way she had suffocated me with her lies. She needed to know there was no way out. "Explain," I said, finally, tilting my head just slightly, like I was curious, like I was genuinely interested in hearing whatever excuse she thought she could create. But we both knew there was nothing that could make this disappear, nothing that could erase the truth. Her breathing hitched. She was trying to think, trying to pull together some story that would make this go away, but there was no story, no version of reality, where she wasn't completely exposed. She swallowed hard, gripping the edge of the table, as if it could keep her from spiraling. "It's not what it looks like," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head as if I were disappointed, not in her betrayal, not in what she had done, but in the sheer weakness of her response. "Come on, Emily," I said, my voice low, even amused. "You're better than this, aren't you?" Her eyes darted back and forth, panic crawling up her throat. She knew there was nothing she could say, but that didn't stop her from trying. I was confused. She blurted out, "Things haven't been the same between us and I didn't mean for it to happen." I let the words settle between us, savoring the desperation in them, because now she wasn't just trying to justify, she was pleading without realizing it. "Didn't mean for it to happen," I repeated, slowly, nodding, as if I were considering it. "Right? So all the messages, the secret meetings, the excuses, that was all just what, an accident?" She flinched at my words, tears welling in her eyes, her hands gripping the table so hard her knuckles turned white. She was breaking, unraveling. She wasn't in control anymore. And she knew it. She had spent so much time thinking she was the one pulling the strings, but now she was the puppet, and I was the one watching her dance. She reached across the table for my hand, as if touch could undo what she had done. "I still love you," she whispered, voice cracking. "It didn't mean anything, Dylan. It was just a mistake." I laughed, then, not loud, not cruel, just a soft, quiet sound that made her flinch harder than if I had shouted, because it wasn't anger, it was something worse. "A mistake," I repeated, letting the word roll off my tongue like it was foreign. "So what was the plan, Emily? Were you ever going to tell me? Were you ever going to stop She shook her head quickly, her face twisting in pain. I didn't want to hurt you, I swear. I was just trying to figure things out. Figure things out, I repeated, my voice flat, no emotion, just the echo of her own pathetic excuse. And what were you figuring out exactly? Whether I was worth staying with, or whether Dylan was a better option. She didn't answer because there was no answer that wouldn't condemn her, and she knew it. She wiped at her eyes, shaking her head, as if she could make this all disappear. Please, she said, voice raw, please just, can we talk about this? Please don't do this. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, staring at her, until she finally looked up at me. And when she did, I saw it, the full realization of what was happening, of what was coming. I let her sit in that moment, let her feel the helplessness, the same helplessness she had made me feel for months. But this time it was different. This time, she was the one who didn't get to choose the outcome. You already did this, Emily, I said, my voice calm, steady. I'm just giving you exactly what you deserve. She opened her mouth to say something else, to beg, to plead, but I was already standing, already walking away, because I had seen everything I needed to see: her breaking, her failing, her realizing that everything she thought she had was gone. She had wanted an escape, wanted something new, something thrilling, and now she had it. But it wasn't what she expected. It wasn't freedom, it was exile. And as I walked away, leaving her there alone at that table in the perfect trap I had set, I didn't feel anger or sadness or regret. I felt nothing, because that was all she was to me now, nothing. Emily's world didn't just crumble, it disintegrated piece by piece, day by day, until there was nothing left but the ruins of the life she had so carefully built, or rather the illusion of a life, because that's all it had ever been, an illusion, a carefully crafted facade designed to make her look like the perfect wife, the successful woman, the one who had it all together. But illusions are fragile, and when they break, they don't crack, they shatter. The first hit came fast and brutal. Dylan was gone before she even had a chance to reach out to him, before she could beg for an explanation, before she could try to salvage whatever pathetic fantasies she thought she had with him. Because the moment she realized I knew everything was the same moment he did, and that was the beauty of it. She never saw it coming. He blocked her, changed his number, erased her like she was nothing, because that's exactly what she had been to him, a temporary thrill, a stolen moment that lost all its excitement the second it became real. And then the whispers started. Because secrets don't stay secret when the truth is exposed. I didn't just let her fall. I made sure there was no safety net, no soft landing, no way to rewrite the story into something she could control. She wasn't the victim. She wasn't the misunderstood woman who had just made a mistake. No, she was the liar, the cheater, the woman who thought she could have everything and ended up with nothing, and the people around her made sure she knew it. Her friends, the ones who used to admire her, who used to envy her perfect marriage and her perfect life, now saw her for what she really was. They didn't say it to her face at first, but she could feel it in the way their texts became less frequent, in the way their invitations stopped coming in, the way their smiles became just a little too forced when they did see her, like they were waiting for the moment to cut her out completely. And eventually they did, one by one, until there was no one left. Her family was worse. They had always liked me, always respected me, and when the truth came out, they didn't defend her, they didn't rally around her. They looked at her with disappointment, with shame, because cheating wasn't just betrayal, it was stupidity, and Emily had been the fool who thought she could have everything without losing anything, but she had lost more than she could have ever imagined. Work wasn't a refuge either. I had made sure of that. She had built her career on reputation, on being seen as reliable, professional, a woman people could trust. But trust is a fragile thing, and when people start to doubt you even a little, that's all it takes. The promotions that once seemed inevitable disappeared. The projects she had been leading were quietly reassigned. The people who used to respect her started looking at her like she was just another mess, another person who couldn't keep their personal life together. And in the professional world, perception is everything. Once that's gone, you might as well be invisible. But the real pain, the one she never saw coming, the one that made her spiral, wasn't losing her job or her friends or her family. It was losing me, not just as a husband, but as the one thing she had always relied on, her stability, her foundation. Because while she was busy chasing some fantasy, I had been making sure that when I walked away, I took everything with me: the house, the savings, the security. I didn't leave her with just guilt. I left her with nothing. She tried reaching out at first, weak attempts, messages left on read, calls that went straight to voicemail. She didn't apologize, not at first. She tried justifying, tried explaining, but there was nothing to explain, nothing to justify. And when she finally did break, when she finally did beg for forgiveness, it was too late. Because I was already gone. And I wasn't just gone, I was thriving. I made sure she saw it too. The new places I traveled, the people I surrounded myself with, the ease in which I moved on, because that was the final blow. Not just that I had left, but that I had left without a scratch, without regret. Without even a backward glance, she had been so sure she could control the outcome, so sure she could manipulate the narrative, but the reality was she had been playing a game she was never equipped to win. The last time I saw her was by accident, or at least that's what she thought. I had known she would be there, a mutual event, something unavoidable, and when she saw me, her entire body tensed, her eyes wide with something between regret and desperation. She looked older, somehow more fragile, like the weight of her choices had settled onto her shoulders in a way she could never shake. She opened her mouth to say something, but I just smiled, nodded slightly, and walked past her because there was nothing left to say, nothing left for her to hold on to, nothing left for her to hope for. She had made her choice, and I had made mine, and now she had to live with it alone. People always say that time heals everything, that one day you wake up and the past feels like a distant dream, like the pain fades and the memories blur until it all just becomes another chapter in a life full of lessons. But I don't believe that, not really, because some betrayals don't fade. Some betrayals carve themselves so deeply into you that even when the wound closes, the scar remains, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe scars aren't just reminders of what we've survived, maybe they're warnings to never let history repeat itself. Emily was history now, not just a person I used to know, but a cautionary tale, a ghost of a life I once thought was real but had only been a mirage. And the best part, the part that makes all of this worth it, is that she knows it too. She knows that I was the best thing that ever happened to her. She knows that she had everything and threw it away for nothing. She knows that while I walked away stronger, she was left with the wreckage of her own choices and no one to blame but herself. And that's the real punishment, not the loss of friends, not the loss of status, not even the financial ruin. The real punishment is knowing she can never undo what she did. She can never go back to the way things were. She can never have a version of her life where she didn't betray the one person who would have stood by her through anything if only she had been worthy of it. I think about her sometimes, not in a way that makes me miss her, not in a way that makes me wish things had gone differently, but in the way a man thinks about a lesson he's learned, the way he replays a mistake in his mind, not with regret but with the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'll never make it again, because that's what she is now, a mistake corrected, a wrong that has been righted, an equation balanced with perfect precision. Some people might say I should have just left, walked away without a second thought, moved on without orchestrating her downfall. But to those people I ask this: if someone takes a knife and stabs you in the back, do you just pull it out and walk away, or do you turn around and make sure they understand exactly what it feels like to bleed? Because that's what betrayal is. It's a wound, a deep one that can't just be ignored, because ignoring it doesn't stop the bleeding, it just lets the one who hurt you walk away without consequences. And I don't believe in that. I believe in justice. I believe in making sure that people feel the weight of their actions, that they don't just get to move on like nothing happened, that they don't get to rewrite the story in their favor and convince themselves that they were the victim when in reality they were the villain. So I made sure Emily learned that lesson, and I made sure Dylan learned it too, and I made sure that when I walked away, I wasn't the broken one. I wasn't the one left wondering what if I was the one who had played the game better, the one who had taken control, the one who had ensured that when all was said and done, there was no question about who had truly won. And now when I look at my life, when I look at the freedom I have, the peace, the clarity, I know that I did exactly what needed to be done. But that's just me. That's just the way I see the world, the way I believe things should be handled, the way I believe that justice should be delivered. And maybe some of you would have done things differently. Maybe some of you would have just packed your bags and walked away without a second thought. Maybe some of you would have confronted her, screamed at her, demanded answers, demanded apologies, demanded closure. But ask yourself this: would that have really been enough? Would that have really made her understand what she had done? Would that have ensured that she never did it again to someone else? Would that have left you feeling like justice had truly been served? Or would it have left you haunted by the thought that she got away with it, that she moved on without ever truly facing the consequences? So tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place, if you were the one who had been betrayed, if you were the one who had the power to turn the tables? Would you have taken the high road, or would you have made sure that the person who tried to destroy you understood exactly what it felt like to lose everything? Because in the end, that's the real question, isn't it? When someone betrays you, when someone takes your trust and shatters it into pieces, do you just pick up the fragments and walk away, or do you make sure they're the ones left standing in the ruins? Bye-bye.